The Cod's Tale, a biography of the fish that changed the world, by Mark Kurlansky, illustrated by S.D. Schindler. Introduction: The biggest school. Fish almost never swim alone. That is why a fisherman who has caught one fish will quickly throw his hook or net back in the water and try to catch more. Fish swim, hunt, eat, and spend their lives in groups. A group of fish is called a school. This is not because it is a place of learning. It is an old word from Holland that means a crowd. Fish live in crowds. The largest school of fish ever known lived in the Atlantic Ocean off Canada and the northeastern part of the United States. So many fish lived in this school that they would bump into one another when swimming. These fish were the Atlantic cod, and they were to become not only the most commonly eaten fish in the Western world, but also one of the most valuable items of trade. Valued like gold or oil, cod played a central role in the history of North America and Europe. It was cod that enabled the Vikings to come to North America. The search for cod brought Europeans across the ocean and encouraged the Pilgrims to settle in Massachusetts. It fed African slaves and financed the slave trade, was the first frozen food, and finally changed the modern laws of the sea. Today, cod are no longer plentiful, and its threatened disappearance is a tragedy that could change the lives of many creatures, including man. This is the cod story. The codfish. The Atlantic cod is a large and ugly fish. It is often more than 3 feet long and has gray or brown skin, yellow or gold spots on its back, and an odd whisker-like feeler hanging from its chin. The cod spends its life swimming with its big mouth wide open, trying to swallow whatever will fit. It will even eat small young cod. It also eats things that are far less tasty. Styrofoam coffee cups have been found in cod stomachs. Almost any bait or object, even a fish-shaped piece of lead, can attract a cod. The cod's greedy appetite makes it easy to catch. Life cycle. A single codfish will lay millions of eggs. The larger the fish, the more eggs she produces. Fish grow larger every year of their lives. A cod that is 40 inches long can produce 3 million eggs at once, but a cod that is 50 inches long can produce 9 million eggs. The longer a cod lives, the more young cod she can produce. If a cod can avoid fishermen and other predators, it can live 30 years. By then, it is as large as a man and produces many millions of eggs. For centuries, it was thought that with so many eggs, cod would always be plentiful. But now we have learned that this isn't true. Most of the eggs do not survive. In the ocean world, in which big fish eat smaller fish and smaller fish eat still smaller ones, it is very dangerous for the smallest creatures. Cod eggs are the size of a very small bead and float unprotected near the ocean surface. 2 weeks after the eggs arrive, almost all of them have been eaten or destroyed by storms. The few surviving eggs hatch into tiny cod. They are extremely hungry and must eat constantly so they can grow. At first, they eat phytoplankton, creatures so small that they appear not as individual animals, but as a cloud in the water. After a few days of eating, the cod are large enough to eat the slightly bigger zooplankton. Days later, still not an inch long, they are large enough to eat krill, which resembles tiny shrimp. But there is competition for this food. Herring, mackerel, and other small fish also eat krill, and while they are at it, they eat baby cod. The humpback whale, with its huge open mouth, moves through the water like a factory-sized scoop. After a few weeks, the surviving cod are about 1.5 inches long and translucent. They are called juveniles and are big enough to leave the dangerous surface of the ocean and dive to the bottom of the sea. There, they look for rocks and other places to hide from the larger fish that hunt them. Enemies. If a young cod can stay alive for the first year, they will now be big enough not to fear other fish that swim above them. The cod can swim up and eat smaller fish or dive back to the bottom and eat mussels and other shellfish. As it is one of the larger fish, few animals will eat the full-grown cod. but they still have two deadly enemies. One is the seal. Seals love to eat cod, but they do not like bones. So they bite the cod in the belly and throw the rest away. The other, more deadly enemy of the cod is man. People will eat almost every part of the cod. Some think the head is the most flavorful part, especially the cheeks and the part under the chin that is sometimes called the tongue. People also eat the eggs, stomach, and liver. Oil from the liver is given to children because it is rich in vitamins. Most agree the oil has a horrible taste. In Scotland, cod liver is stuffed in cod stomachs and called crappenmuggy, a name that sounds as unappealing as the dish itself. In Iceland, they grill cod skin and serve it with butter. And long ago, when the people in Iceland were very poor, they sometimes soaked cod bones until they were soft and ate them too. On choosing a fresh cod, the head should be large, tail small, shoulders thick, liver creamy white, and the skin clear and silvery with a bronze-like sheen. Manual of Naval Cookery, British Admiralty, 1921. The continental shelf. It is easy to imagine that the ocean is full of fish, but we only think that because fish live near us, close to the land. Most fish live on continental shelves, the part of the land that extends from the shore under the ocean. In some places for only 20 miles and in others for hundreds of miles. In that shallower water, sunlight helps tiny sea organisms grow and become food for fish like cod. Crossing the Atlantic Ocean from America to Europe, a boat sails past many fish when it first leaves America. Then, once it goes beyond the North American continental shelf, it may go for days without being near a fish. As it gets close to Europe, approaching the European shelf, fish appear again. But in the northern part of the globe where cod live, the continents are close to each other. Britain is close to Iceland, which is close to Greenland, which is close to Labrador and Newfoundland. The shelves of these land masses are even closer, and the water is cold. Since cod live on shelves and like cold water, this is the one place where the ocean can be crossed without ever being far from cod. Vikings. Between the years 800 and 1100, the Vikings left their homes in Norway, Sweden, and Denmark to travel farther than Europeans had ever gone before, throughout Europe and all the way across the cold North Atlantic. They were able to travel such long distances because they had solved two of the great problems of ocean travel. First, the hull or bottom of a Viking ship could endure months of pounding ocean waves because the Vikings overlapped the planks instead of just placing them next to each other. And secondly, they had food perfect for travel, dried cod. The Vikings learned to hang the cod in the cold, dry Arctic air until it was as hard as wood. This tough, dry food had no fat, was full of protein, and would not spoil. The Vikings were traders, constantly in search of goods. Their limited northern products made from fur, reindeer antlers, and walrus tusks were not enough for a prosperous trade, so they also sold into slavery people they captured by attacking villages in Britain and France. This made the Vikings a feared warlike tribe. No Viking was more feared than Eric the Red. His father had been expelled from his native Norway for killing people, and then Eric was expelled from Iceland for the same thing. He left Iceland in about 982 with his son, Leif Erikson, and a band of followers. On a small open-deck ship, they sailed west over the dark sea. The waves sometimes rolled 3 times the height of the Vikings' masts and threatened to crush them. But with their sail and oars, they skillfully rowed on just the right side of each wave until they arrived in a land of glaciers, rocks, and icebergs that glowed robin's egg blue. Timeline. Prehistoric times. British and Scandinavians start to fish for cod in the North Sea. Circa AD 600. The Basques begin hunting whales. Circa 800. The Vikings begin traveling out of Scandinavia. Basques in southern France learned shipbuilding techniques from these raiders. Circa 861. The Vikings discover Iceland. Circa 982, Eric leads the Vikings from Iceland to Greenland. Circa 1000, Leif Erikson makes first of several trips to North America. Stockfish. When cod, is taken in the far seas and is desired to keep it for 10 to 12 years, it is gutted and its head removed, and it is dried in the air and sun, and in no wise by a fire, or smoked. And when this is done, it is called stockfish. And when it hath been kept a long time, and it is desired to eat it, it must be beaten with a wooden hammer for a full hour. Then set it to soak in warm water for a full 12 hours or more. Then cook and skim it very well like beef. Le Messeigneur de Paris, author unknown, circa 1393. Eric found a new land which he named Greenland to attract settlers, but there was no green, only white and blue ice and black and gray rock. The Vikings built a small colony, but after a few years, hoping to find a better place, they caught more cod and hung it from poles to dry until they had enough food to sail farther west. Then, just as they were about to leave, Eric hurt his foot in a horse riding accident. He had to stay in Greenland, so his son Leif Erikson led the next journey. Leif sailed on to a place he called Stoneland, which was probably the rocky Labrador coast of Canada, and then to Woodland and Vineland. The identity of these places is not certain. They may have been Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, or Maine. The Vikings found little food in these places, and angry tribesmen often attacked them. But they could keep traveling because they had their hard, dried fish to break off and eat like stale bread during the long winter months. Many historians did not believe that the Vikings had been to North America until 1960, when the remains of 8 Viking-built turf houses dating from the year 1000 were found in Newfoundland, proving that they had been to America long before Christopher Columbus. The virtues of wood. Stockfish is hard as lumps of wood, but free of bad flavor, in fact, without much flavor at all. Though very nice as an appetizer, and after all, anything that performs that function cannot be all that bad. Poggio Bracciolini, 1436, celebrated Latin scholar. Big secret. The Basques were probably the next Europeans to visit America. In the 14th and 15th centuries, most European fishing communities had heard rumors that the Basques were fishing in a land across the sea. The Basques live in a small area of velvety green mountains with rocky crests that is partly in southwestern France and partly in Spain. But they are neither Spanish nor French. They have their own customs, traditions, and language. The Basques were the first people to hunt whales for profit. At first they caught them near their beaches, but in the 9th century the Vikings came to the land of Basques. The Basques were able to discover how to build ships that could travel long distances the way the Vikings had. With these new strong ships, the Basques chased whales into northern waters, covering the sound of their oars with cloths so they could row up to the sleeping black giants and plunge their long harpoons into the whales' sides. The chasse d'eau. To prepare salt cod, it must be soaked in water for 24 hours or longer. Ideally, the water should be changed from time to time. In 1947, the president of the council, the governing body of France, asked his valet to flush the toilet once an hour for the next week in preparation for a special dinner he was preparing on Sunday. The dish was dried cod. The toilet was fed by a water tank mounted high up on the wall. The chasse d'eau, a stockfish left in the chasse d'eau for 2 days, was soft and ready for cooking. The Basques traveled far north for whales, and by about 1400 they found the crowded school of cod on the coast of North America where the Vikings had fished. By 1400, many of the Vikings had become Christian and had settled in various parts of northern Europe. The colonists on Greenland had died off, and the Basques had the waters of North America to themselves. They began to sell cod in Europe, the first to earn money from North American fish. Because the Basques were growing very rich selling cod, they did not want to tell anyone where they had found this huge school of fish. They did not claim the land. They built no settlements, though they did have camps in the summer where whale fat was cooked into oil and where the codfish were spread open, salted, and dried. Then in the fall, they loaded their ships with barrels of whale oil and dried fish that they took back to Europe to sell. Refrigeration and freezing had not yet been invented, and fresh fish spoiled quickly, so only people who lived on the coast could eat fish. But the salted cod of the Basques could be stacked in carts and carried inland without spoiling. For the first time, many Europeans could eat fish. Salting. The Basques did not just dry the cod as the Vikings had, they salted it too. Unlike the Vikings, the Basques had a plentiful salt supply from trade in the Mediterranean. Dried and salted cod preserved even better, and it could be soaked in water and turned back into a soft, flaky fish.